I always believed that if you gave your child everything, your time, your love, your strength, he'd grow into someone who would never forget where he came from. I believed it so deeply that I built my entire life around that idea. And now I wish I hadn't. My name is Linda Avery. I'm 64 years old, born and raised in Joliet, Illinois, but spent most of my adult life in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. I was never anything special. A clerk at a library for over 3 decades, widow of a kind man who died too young, and the mother of one child, Marcus. He was my world, and for a long time I thought I was his. I remember the night it all fell apart. Not just a crack in the wall, not a small fracture that could be patched with apology and time. No, this was a collapse. The kind that buries you before you realize you were standing beneath it. Marcus had just come home from work. He ran his own tech company, something with cloud security and data protection. I never quite understood it. What I did understand was that he was always tired now, always irritable. The boy who once hugged me just for making grilled cheese now walked past me with a distracted nod, his eyes glued to his phone. I'd made pot roast that night. His favorite. Slow-cooked the way he used to beg for as a teenager after football practice. He barely touched it. Not hungry, he muttered, shoving the plate away. I've got meetings. But honey, you've barely eaten all day, I said, trying not to sound like I was nagging. You work so hard. You need to take care of yourself. That's when he slammed his fist on the table. Jesus, Mom. Can you just stop? I'm not 12 anymore. I don't need you breathing down my neck every damn second. The air froze between us. I'm just worried, I said softly. Well, stop. You're always here. Always hovering. It's pathetic. You don't have a life. You just sit here waiting for me like some damn house pet. His words landed like slaps. I blinked, stunned. He'd never spoken to me like that before. Not even during his worst teenage years. I stood slowly. If I'm such a burden to you. He cut me off. Just die, Mom. I don't give a shit. Honestly, I'd probably get more done without you constantly around. That was it. It wasn't the first time Marcus had said something harsh. But it was the first time he meant it. I saw it in his eyes, cold, blank, tired of me. I stood there, the silence pressing in around us like a second skin. He didn't take it back. He didn't say, I'm sorry, or I didn't mean that. He just grabbed his laptop, walked to his office, and shut the door. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when the words still echoed in the room like gunshots. Instead, I washed the dishes in silence, folded the kitchen towel, walked slowly to my room and packed a bag. No dramatic goodbye. No note. No confrontation. At dawn, I called a cab and left. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. The bus ride to Oregon was long, over 2 days. I chose Oregon because it was far. Because I once saw a documentary about the coast and remembered thinking it looked like a place where people could disappear without dying. I found a small town called Havenport. Quiet. Coastal. The kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions. I rented a room in a local boarding house run by a retired couple, the Jenkins, who didn't blink when I said I had no family. I told them I was widowed. That part was true. I told them my son lived far away and we hadn't spoken in years. That part wasn't. But it soon would be. During the first week, I barely spoke. I walked to the beach every morning before sunrise, sat on the cold sand, and just breathed. It had been years since I'd taken a breath without worry attached to it. For once, I wasn't checking my phone to see if Marcus needed something. I wasn't making grocery lists based on his preferences. I wasn't folding his laundry, or replacing his toothpaste, or texting him reminders about his prescriptions. I wasn't anyone's mother anymore, and that should have broken me. But instead, something strange happened. I began to feel free. I started volunteering at the town library. It felt familiar. Safe. The scent of old paper and quiet hallways comforted me in ways I hadn't expected. The head librarian, Maria, was a kind woman in her 40s who didn't pry, just asked me to sort donations and help with the children's reading hour. They started calling me Miss Linda. No one in Havenport knew I had a son who told me to die. No one knew that just weeks before, I'd stood in a kitchen, holding a plate of pot roast, and realized I was no longer wanted. At night, I sat in my small room and watched the ocean from my window. It made no promises, asked nothing of me. Sometimes I imagined myself dissolving into it, like sea foam. A woman erased by waves. I still didn't cry. Not until the seventh night. I was folding my clothes when I found one of Marcus's childhood shirts at the bottom of my suitcase, blue with a little embroidered dinosaur. I had packed it by mistake. I held it close and sobbed for the first time. The days passed slowly, but not unpleasantly. The Jenkins invited me to supper once a week. Maria brought me scones from her favorite bakery. I made small friendships. Human, gentle connections. It wasn't family, but it didn't hurt. And then, one morning, exactly 30 days after I'd left Chicago, I turned on the small radio in the library and heard a segment from a Chicago news station. Local tech CEO Marcus Avery issues public statement asking for help locating his missing mother. I froze. I felt Maria watching me from across the counter. "That's your name," she said quietly. I nodded. "Yes, it is." She didn't ask more. Just placed a hand on mine. I didn't know what Marcus had said in the statement. I didn't want to know. But I imagined him now. Maybe tired. Maybe afraid. Maybe regretting. Or maybe just looking for closure. What I did know was this: he'd broken something in me. And even if he found me, it wouldn't make it whole again. Not anymore. There's a strange comfort in being a stranger. In Havenport, I was no one. And that anonymity wrapped around me like a blanket, heavy but warm. No one expected anything of me. No one knew the weight I carried. Here, I wasn't Marcus Avery's mom. I was just Linda, the quiet woman with silver hair who shelved books and brought her own tea bags to work. Sometimes, I caught my reflection in the window at the library and barely recognized the woman looking back. Her eyes were quieter now, but not dead. Just resting. Healing, maybe. I hadn't spoken to Marcus in 30 days. It was the longest silence we'd ever had. And though part of me longed for a message, a call, something, I also feared it. Because if he reached out, I'd have to decide, forgive or protect myself. And I wasn't sure I had the strength for either. One morning, while wiping down the reading tables before the children came in, Maria walked up behind me, her voice as gentle as always. "You're not from around here, are you?" I looked up startled. She smiled. "That's not an accusation, Linda. Just an observation. People who end up in Havenport without roots, they usually come here trying to leave something behind." I didn't answer right away. I wiped the table a little longer, then finally said, "I guess I did." She nodded and didn't press further. That was what I appreciated most about people here. They weren't nosy. They didn't dig. They let you unfold at your own pace. Over time, I started sharing bits of myself. I used to live in Illinois, I told her one afternoon, filing books alphabetically. Big city. Suburbs. Family. I hesitated. Not anymore. She didn't ask what happened. She just nodded and moved on. There was a freedom in that silence. In that absence of curiosity. The nursing facility wasn't what most would imagine. It wasn't sad. Not clinical. More like a quiet residence for the overlooked. People who had nowhere else to go but weren't entirely ready to stop living. I'd found it through a local bulletin board and paid rent from my savings. $6.20 a month for a room, meals, and occasional group activities I mostly avoided. At night, I'd sit with a woman named Ruth who was 78 and had once been a schoolteacher in Maine. We didn't talk much. Just sat outside under the porch awning with mugs of lukewarm tea, watching the tide pull in the night. One evening, as the wind picked up and the porch lights flickered, Ruth looked over and said, "Your heart still hurts." I didn't answer. "You've got the look of someone carrying love that turned into weight." That made me look at her. Her eyes were pale but clear. "It doesn't go away, you know," she added. "It just stops crushing you." I tried to write a letter to Marcus. Several times, actually. The first one was angry. The second was sad. The third rambled so much that I tore it up halfway through. What could I say? That I missed him? That I loved him even now? That I'd heard what he said and believed him? Or worse, that I wasn't sure I did anymore? What scared me most wasn't the cruelty in his words that night. It was how normal it had become for him to talk to me like that. Like I was wallpaper in his life, fading and ignorable. And yet, I still loved him. God help me, I still loved him. That's what no one tells you about being a mother. The heart doesn't come with an off switch. It just keeps giving, even when there's nothing left to receive. 3 weeks into my stay, I joined the community garden club. It was a small, unruly plot behind the post office, but it grew tomatoes the size of softballs and carrots that made your hands smell like earth for hours. I liked it there. There was something poetic about planting things again, about touching soil and knowing that not everything needs to grow fast or impress anyone. One Saturday morning, while planting basil beside a retired fisherman named Hank, he handed me a mug of strong coffee and said, "So what are you running from, Linda?" I smiled. Who says I'm running? Everyone in Havenport's running from something. It's kind of our charm. I didn't respond. Just dug my fingers deeper into the dirt. That night, I finally turned on my phone. It had been off since the day I left. There were 38 missed calls from Marcus. 12 voicemails. A dozen texts that started with coldness. Fine. Just go. And slowly unraveled into panic. Mom, where are you? Please say something. I'm sorry. The last message was a picture. Of him, sitting at the kitchen table. Alone. In front of an untouched plate of pot roast. I didn't reply. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Something in me needed him to feel it, the real absence of me. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. The absence of the mother who always showed up, always cooked, always forgave, always stayed. I wasn't punishing him. I was grieving. And for once, I needed the silence. 2 days later, Maria called me into her office at the library. I got a call this morning, she said gently. From someone named Marcus Avery. He said he was looking for his mother. That he'd tracked her here. Through your debit card, I assume. I froze. He asked if we had a Linda working here. I didn't confirm anything. I told him I'd pass the message along if it sounded familiar. My hands were trembling. She handed me a piece of paper. He said he'll be at the Havenport Inn. Waiting. I stared at the address for a long time. That night, I went for a walk by the shore. The tide was higher than usual, the wind colder. I found a driftwood log and sat on it, hugging my coat close. All I could think about was Marcus's face when he was 8, beaming up at me during his school play, his cheeks painted like a tiger. I remembered how he clung to my waist when he had nightmares, how he'd beg me not to leave his room until he fell asleep. When had that little boy become the man who told me to die? Was it my fault? Had I smothered him? Had I expected too much? Given too much? Maybe love, in its purest form, has a way of becoming invisible until it's gone. And now he was here, in the same town, just blocks away. I didn't go to him that night. I let the moon rise and the wind carry my thoughts. And for the first time, I whispered to myself, "You don't owe him your pain. Not anymore." The day I realized my mother was really gone, it didn't feel like a movie. There was no dramatic music. No slow motion collapse onto the kitchen floor. It was quiet, ordinary, almost pathetic. I walked into the kitchen and saw the roast she'd made still wrapped in foil. It was probably cold by then. I stared at it, knowing she must have prepared it the night before she left. I didn't even remember saying goodbye that morning. If I even did. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because my bed wasn't available, but because something about walking into my room felt wrong. That room had always been mine, but the hallway leading to it still smelled like her lotion. Lavender and lemon. Like a hug you didn't know you missed until it vanished. The first few days, I assumed she just needed space. Mom was always emotional. Sensitive. I thought she was punishing me, honestly. Teaching me a lesson. She'd done that once before. Left for a weekend to stay with her cousin in St. Louis after a fight when I was 19. But she came back Sunday night. Always did. This time, Sunday came and went. No messages. No calls. I texted her. "You made your point. Just come home." Nothing. Then Monday. "I'm serious, Mom. Where are you?" Still nothing. By Tuesday, I was calling every hour. I checked hospitals. Police. Drove to her friends' houses. Asked neighbors. No one knew. It wasn't until I checked her closet and saw that she'd taken her small roller suitcase and her red scarf, that stupid red scarf she only wore when she was serious about something, that I knew. She hadn't left in anger. She'd left for good. The irony was suffocating. I spent years building my life, working 80-hour weeks, scaling a tech startup into a company with offices in 2 states. I thought I was doing it all to make her proud, to give her comfort, safety. But she hadn't asked for any of it. What she wanted was me, and I was too busy treating her like noise in the background of my ambition. I started seeing her everywhere. The grocery store, the library, the bench near our neighborhood fountain. Women who weren't her, but had her walk, her silver hair, her kindness in their eyes. It was maddening. I watched videos of us from years ago. Birthdays, family dinners, that one Christmas where she tried to make gingerbread and burned her hand. I watched those videos like a man grieving someone who had died. In many ways I was. It was around the 3rd week that I found a letter she'd written me years ago. It was tucked into the back of a photo album, yellowed at the edges. She had written it when I graduated college. I must have read it once and forgotten it. But reading it now was like being stabbed. Marcus, I know I'm not always the easiest mom to have. I worry too much. I fuss. I ask questions you don't want to answer. But I do all of that because you're my heart walking around outside my body. I love you beyond anything I could ever explain. I know one day you'll go far. Just don't forget to come back. That line, don't forget to come back, hit me like a brick wall. I had never come back. Even when I moved her into my home, it wasn't about her. It was about convenience. About making sure she wasn't alone. About pretending I was a good son without actually being one. And now I told her to die. And she listened. It took a private investigator to track her debit card usage. A withdrawal in Oregon. A transaction at a grocery store in Havenport. Eventually, a call to the town's library confirmed she worked there under her real name. When the librarian told me Linda worked mornings and sometimes helped with kids' reading hours, my throat tightened. That was so her, giving pieces of herself even when she was the one bleeding. I drove 2,000 miles in 3 days. Didn't stop to eat. Slept in rest areas. Played the same voicemail from her birthday on repeat just to hear her voice. I'm so proud of you, Marcus. Don't forget to rest. Love you always. That always sounded cruel now. Like something I didn't deserve. The first time I saw her again, it wasn't close. I waited across the street from the library. She came out with a paper bag in one hand and a book tucked beneath her arm. She wore a navy blue sweater. Hair tied back. Slower than I remembered, but peaceful. She laughed at something a teenager said on the steps. She looked light. As if losing me had lifted something. And that broke me more than anything else. I checked into the Havenport Inn, left a message with the library, said I wouldn't come to her if she didn't want me to. Gave her the choice, something I had rarely done in my life. Then I waited, and waited. 3 days. Each night, I sat on the balcony of my small motel room, staring out toward the sea, wondering if she was out there too, wondering if she thought of me, wondering if she still loved me at all. I'd never begged before in my life, but that night, I got on my knees in the middle of that motel floor and begged the silence. Begged God. Begged whoever would listen. On the 4th morning, there was a knock on the door. I opened it and she was standing there. Linda Avery. My mother. Smaller than I remembered. Older. But with the same soft, firm eyes. She didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just said, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, heart in my throat. She walked in, sat on the edge of the chair by the window, and looked out toward the ocean. "I heard your message," she said. I nodded. My voice was gone. I've had a lot of time to think. I opened my mouth, but she held up a hand. "Let me say this first. You hurt me, Marcus. Deeply. More than I ever thought you could. And not just that night. 4 years. You stopped seeing me. I became a fixture in your house. A ghost who cooked and folded laundry." I lowered my eyes. Shame burned every inch of me. She continued. "When you said those words, it wasn't the cruelty that broke me. It was the truth in your tone. You meant it. Maybe not forever, but in that moment, You meant it. I started to speak. Mom, I know you're sorry, she said. And I believe you. Silence stretched again. But I can't come back. My heart dropped. I forgive you. I do. But I won't return to being invisible. To being spoken to like I'm a burden. I came to Havenport to remember who I was without being your mother. I felt a lump rise in my throat. And who are you now? She smiled faintly. Someone I'm beginning to like again. Tears came then. Quiet. Hot. Unrelenting. I miss you, I whispered. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, she said gently. But I'm giving it anyway. Because I need peace. But I also need boundaries. She stood, her eyes glistening. I won't shut you out. But you'll have to meet me here. On my terms. As an adult. As a man who chooses to love me. Not out of guilt, but out of understanding. I nodded, trembling. I can do that, I said. She walked to the door, paused, and added, Start by writing me a letter. I want to know the man my son has become. Not the boy I raised. And then she left. And I knew. This was the beginning of something. Not what we had before. But something real. The day after I saw Marcus at the inn, I felt like I'd aged 10 years, but lighter. It wasn't because we resolved anything. Not in the way people think healing happens. There was no dramatic embrace. No apologies shouted in the rain. But something shifted. I took back something that had been slowly slipping away over the years. Myself. People talk a lot about motherhood as sacrifice. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. The hardest part of being a mother isn't giving everything. It's realizing when you need to keep something for yourself. The letter came 4 days later. I almost didn't open it. My hands shook as I held the envelope, recognizing his handwriting immediately. Inside was a simple sheet of paper, thick and folded perfectly. And when I opened it, the words came slowly, like he'd written them with trembling fingers. Mom, I don't know how to begin this letter, and I don't know if I have the right to end it either. But I'm going to try. You were right. I stopped seeing you. I made you small in my life so I could feel big in mine. That's the ugliest thing I've ever admitted to myself. I grew up thinking success would protect me from loneliness, from fear, from failure. But it didn't. It just made me busy and blind. You gave me love when I didn't deserve it. And when I told you to die, you did something I didn't think you were capable of. You left. You finally chose you. I think part of me respects that more than I can explain. I don't expect you to come back. I just want you to know I see you now. If you're willing, I'd like to write to you every week. Not as your son trying to fix what he broke, but as a man trying to earn the right to be in your life again. With love. Marcus. I cried. Not from sadness. Not from joy. From truth. Because in those words, I saw a man I hadn't met in years. I wrote back. Marcus, thank you for the letter. I read it twice, then once more out loud, just to make sure it was real. You sounded like someone who's begun to understand the value of silence. Write me. Once a week. Or once a month. I won't set rules. But know this, I'm not your shadow anymore. I'm my own person. And if we're going to build something again, it has to be as equals. I love you. But I love myself now too. That's new. Mom. Marcus. I didn't expect her to write back. But she did. And her words didn't feel like a doorway. They felt like a window. One I could slowly, carefully crawl through if I was patient and quiet. So I wrote again. Once a week, like I'd promised. I told her about things I'd never told anyone. About the time I cried in a meeting and blamed it on allergies. About the silence in the house that used to feel like peace but now felt like punishment. About how her chair at the dinner table stayed empty no matter how many guests I invited. She replied. Not always long letters. Sometimes just a paragraph. I planted rosemary today. The scent reminds me of your childhood. You used to hate it. Ruth from the porch passed away. She said you were the only man I ever talked about. I think she was disappointed. I still have the shirt with the dinosaur on it. I didn't throw it away. With each letter, we weren't erasing the past. We were threading new fabric from it. 3 months later, I flew back to Havenport. She didn't know I was coming. I didn't go to her house. didn't show up at the library. I just sat in the garden behind the post office and waited. She arrived mid-morning, basket in hand. When she saw me, she didn't flinch. She just sat beside me. "You're early," she said. "For what?" "For forgiveness," she said, half smiling. I nodded. "I don't need it today." She handed me a pair of gloves. "Good. Then help me plant these damn tomatoes." "Linda, there's a peace that comes not from forgetting, but from accepting." I still remember that night in the kitchen. I remember the slam of his hand on the table. I remember the words. "Just die. I don't give a shit." But now I also remember the man who planted tomatoes beside me in silence, who walked with me to the shore afterward and said nothing, but meant everything. He didn't ask to come home. I didn't offer. But he visits now. He stays at the inn. Writes to me. Brings me books he thinks I'll love. Tells me about his therapy, about his attempts to rebuild, not just with me, but with himself. I don't mother him anymore. I see him. He sees me. We are two people who hurt each other, and who chose, separately and together, not to stay broken. Epilogue. It's been a year. I still live in Havenport. The library gave me a part-time job. The Jenkins couple gave me a room with more light. I teach knitting on Tuesdays. And sometimes I still wear the red scarf. Marcus visits every few weeks. We don't talk about the past unless one of us brings it up. Sometimes we cry. Sometimes we laugh. Sometimes we just walk the beach in silence, letting the ocean hold the words we don't know how to say. I don't think love always returns the way it left. Sometimes it comes back with softer edges, gentler hands, and new rules. I may never live with my son again, but he's with me now, in ways he never was before. And that, for me, is enough.